The gun was already against her skull before she even opened her eyes. Not slowly, not gently. Her eyes snapped open like a switch thrown in a dark room, and the first sound she heard was the click of a hammer being pulled back. "Last chance," the man said. "Tell us where it is, or I pull this trigger right now." She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She looked at him, cold, steady, completely still, and said, "You won't." The man blinked. "You need me alive," she said. "We both know it. So lower the gun, untie me, and let me tell you something worth more than whatever you're being paid." 3 seconds of silence. The gun came down, and that was the moment she understood, this impossible, terrifying, electric moment, that she was not who she used to be, not entirely. The face looking back at her in the cracked window behind the man's shoulder was 22 years old, smooth, young, unfamiliar. Her own face had been 41. She had died 3 days ago, and somehow, she was back. Her name had been Sable Voss. She had run the most feared private intelligence firm in the country. 20 years, 17 languages, 32 powerful men brought to their knees using nothing but information and patience. And then her business partner, the only person she had ever trusted, had dropped poison into her tea on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. She remembered the ceiling as she fell, white, perfectly white, the sound of him stepping over her body to reach her safe. Now she was in the body of a 22-year-old named Lena Cho. Lena, it turned out, was a nobody, third daughter of a fading merchant family, no job, almost no money, an ex-fiancé who had walked out without explanation, a mother who sent clipped letters full of instructions, 2 older sisters who had stopped pretending to care. The men who had held her at gunpoint, they worked for a local debt collector. Lena had stumbled into information she wasn't supposed to have. They'd grabbed her and interrogated her for hours. They had no idea they'd been interrogating Sable Voss. She let them believe what they wanted. She always had. She walked out of that room, into the night, into a city that didn't know her name yet. She would fix that. Lena Cho's apartment was 4 walls and a window that looked at another wall, a shelf of cracked paperback books, a savings account with almost nothing in it, a letter on the table from her mother that said, "Saturday dinner, don't embarrass us." Sable read that letter once, set it down, made tea. Then she opened Lena's laptop and got to work. By the end of that week, she had turned Lena's savings into 11 times their original value. 3 trades, no noise, no trace. The kind of clean, surgical exploitation of information gaps that she had been doing since before Lena Cho was born. By the end of the following week, a better apartment, 1 good suit, a new phone. She was not going to be a nobody for a single day longer than necessary. Saturday arrived. She went to dinner. The Cho family home was a large house wearing its former wealth like a costume that had been washed too many times. Her mother spotted her in the doorway, and her eyes dropped immediately to the suit. Sharp, black, the kind of cut that said, "I am not asking for your approval." "Lena," her mother said, "where did you get that?" "I bought it." "With what money?" "Mine." A pause that lasted 1 beat too long. Then her mother stepped aside. The table was a battlefield Sable had seen 1,000 times. 2 older sisters, Priya and Dara, positioned like artillery, smiling with all their teeth. An uncle built entirely from sideways comments, family friends who had come specifically to watch. Priya opened fire first. "Still at the filing office?" she said, voice dripping with sweetness. "How precious." Sable looked at her. Not Lena's look, Not the look that went soft and apologetic and searched the table for escape. Sable's look. "I left the filing office," she said. "I'm trading now. I had a good week." Priya smiled. "Trading what exactly?" "Commodities futures. I've also been watching the Port District rezoning. The street hasn't priced it correctly. Should be an interesting 3 weeks." Silence. Her uncle leaned forward. He fancied himself the financial mind of the family. "How would you know anything about the rezoning timeline?" Sable read, simply. She turned back to her food. She didn't look around to check the reaction. She never looked around to check. That was how you showed them it mattered. She didn't let it matter. But she felt it, the recalibration spreading around the table like a current. Her father glancing up from his plate, her mother's hand pausing on her chopsticks. The first crack in the version of Lena they had built and shelved. She left before dessert. Outside, the night air smelled like the sea. She breathed it in. Good, she thought. Round 1. The name hit her on a Wednesday morning, buried in the financial pages. Dorian Vael. The Vael Group had acquired 3 failing textile companies in the industrial district for a price that made 0 commercial sense. Sable read the article twice, then she sat back. She knew that name. Everyone in the intelligence world did, eventually. Dorian Vael was the kind of man who existed in the negative space of a city's power structure, felt everywhere, seen almost nowhere. His legitimate businesses were real, but they were the visible surface of something enormous and dark underneath. He ran the Vael Syndicate, the most powerful criminal organization in Karoven. So thoroughly in control of the city's underworld that the police had stopped trying to touch him years ago. They simply redirected around him, the way roads redirect around mountains. The textile acquisition made no commercial sense, which meant it made perfect sense for another reason. He was buying territory, supply lines, leverage. She filed it away. She had no reason to be interested in Dorian Vael. 3 days later, he walked into her cafe. She knew it was him before she saw his face. The room changed. That was the only way to describe it. Every small sound and movement in the cafe reorganized itself around a new gravitational center. The barista stood straighter. The 2 men near the door shifted without looking at him. The air itself seemed to pull slightly inward. He was tall, still in the way that isn't emptiness, the way that comes from having no uncertainty at all about who you are and what will happen next. Dark suit, no tie, a scar along his jaw, old and white. He sat at the table next to hers. Sable did not look up. An assistant materialized, bent close, murmured something. Dorian listened without expression, said one word. The man vanished. Then, "You're reading yesterday's paper." She looked up. His eyes were dark and completely steady. He was watching her the way a chess player watches a board, not with emotion, but with total concentration. "I know," she said. "I read the news a day late on purpose. It helps me see which information I was supposed to react to emotionally and which information I was supposed to miss entirely." A pause. Something moved behind his eyes, barely, like a current far underwater. "That's an unusual approach," he said. "It's a useful one." He studied her for a moment that went one beat past comfortable. "You're Lena Cho," he said. She went still, kept her face easy. "You know who I am?" "I know most people in this district," he said. His voice was low, flat, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to carry weight. "You traded against the Mercel position last week. Significant gain, very short window." "I did," he said. "That trade required information that wasn't public." "All good trades require information that isn't public," she said. The question is where you get it. He looked at her. People who make trades like that become visible. In Karoven, becoming visible has consequences. I'm aware. She picked up her coffee. Is that a warning? A pause. No, an observation. He looked away. He finished his coffee. He answered 2 calls in Eastern Valak. Then he left without looking at her again. Sable set her cup down. Her pulse was elevated, not from fear, from something more precise than fear. For the first time since she'd woken up in this body, she had been seen. Not Lena, her, the real thing underneath. Seen by a man who did not pay attention to unimportant people. She allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of satisfaction. Then she went back to the newspaper. The invitation arrived 10 days later. Heavy cream card, embossed lettering, no return address. Dinner at the Meridian Hotel, hosted by the Vael Group Foundation. Priya called within the hour. I heard, she said, her voice doing that careful calibration, casual on top, furious underneath. A Vael Foundation invite. Do you know how hard those are to get? Father's firm has been trying for years. She said. Are you going? I haven't decided. She had decided 30 seconds after opening the envelope. The Meridian Hotel was the oldest and finest building in Karoven. The lobby smelled like wood polish and old money and the specific quiet of places that have never needed to prove themselves. She wore charcoal gray, fitted, every line of her face visible. The room had 40 guests. She cataloged them in 90 seconds. City officials, business owners, 2 judges, 1 financial journalist who was there to be managed, and a cluster of men near the windows who were not businessmen and held themselves with the specific ease of people paid to be dangerous. Dorian stood near the center of the room, dark suit, completely still. He saw her arrive. She knew because the conversation he was in paused, 1/2 second, then resumed. She took a glass of water and began to move. 20 minutes in, a man appeared at her elbow, 50s, heavy watch, the territorial confidence of someone who had been the most powerful person in the room for too long. Aldous Brenner, he said, Brenner Capital, a pause for effect. I've heard interesting things about you. I've heard interesting things about you too, she said pleasantly. His smile didn't know what to do with that. Tell me, he said, voice dropping into the familiar register of a man testing a woman he has already decided is beneath him. How does a girl with no background, no connections, no institutional support make a trade like the Mersal play? Beginner's luck? She looked at him. Pattern recognition, she said. Most analysts read the data they're given. I read the data that's absent. The Mersal position had 3 critical absences. The public numbers were being managed. I can walk you through each one if you'd like. She did, specifically, technically, the kind of fluency that takes years to develop. Brenner's smile went fixed. He'd expected deflection. He'd expected sweetness or confusion, or the kind of apologetic vagueness that powerful men learn to expect from young women they've decided to condescend to. He got none of it. Impressive, he said with much less warmth. You'd almost think you'd been in this industry for decades. I learned quickly, she said. He left shortly after, and Dorian Vael was standing 3 feet away. Brenner doesn't usually lose conversations, he said. He didn't lose. He collected information and withdrew when it was more complex than expected. That's rational. Most people aren't paying attention, he said. He held her gaze for 1 long beat. Sit next to me at dinner, he said, not a question. All right, she said. The dinner lasted 2 hours. He didn't perform conversation. He asked real questions about the city's financial infrastructure, about the port development, about information advantage in markets, and he listened to her answers the way someone listens when they are genuinely trying to understand something, not when they are waiting for their turn to speak. She gave him real answers, mostly. She kept the full shape of herself behind a door she hadn't decided to open yet. But she noted he was extraordinary, not in the showy way, in the quiet way, the way that watched everything and revealed nothing and arrived 3 steps ahead of the available evidence. She found herself, for the first time since waking up in this new life, genuinely interested in a person. Careful, said the part of her that had been burned. Interesting, said the part of her that had always been stronger. At the entrance afterwards, he walked her out. The other guests saw it. Their eyes tracked it immediately, the social weight of it landing visibly in the room. At the door, he said, "I have a business matter. I want your perspective. Not tonight." "All right." He looked at her. "Most people here tonight were building social capital. You weren't." "No." "Why did you come?" She considered him. "Same reason you did," she said. "To understand something I couldn't understand from a distance." "And do you?" "Getting there," she said, and got in her car. She did not look back. She didn't need to. The folder arrived Tuesday morning, delivered by his assistant, a severe, contained young man named Ellis, who appeared at her door at 7 a.m. and said Mr. Vael would appreciate her analysis by Thursday. She opened it. Aldrin Shipping. 3 years of ledgers. Beautifully manipulated. Someone had worked very hard to hide a systematic siphoning of funds. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She spent 30 hours on it. Then she sent back 12 handwritten pages, she didn't trust digital channels she hadn't secured herself, with the mechanism fully mapped, the timeline reconstructed, and 3 sentences at the end. 3 sentences identifying who had done it. The response came back the same evening. Thursday, my office, 9 a.m. His office was in a building that looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. Inside, it had the specific silence of a place where people had learned not to make unnecessary sound. He read her analysis at his desk without speaking, turned each page completely, set it down. "You identified Brenner," he said. "Yes, based on a pattern. His manipulation signature. I've seen it before." She paused. "In a different context." "What context?" "I did financial intelligence work for a long time," she said. Which was true, completely true, just not in the way he would understand. He looked at her steadily. "You're not who you appear to be." The words landed in the room. She held them, then, "I'm exactly who I appear to be. I'm just more of it than people expect." Something in his expression, that severe, near-glacial expression, shifted. "I have a proposition," he said. She didn't say yes immediately. She thought about it for 48 hours. She thought about what Dorian Vael was, what his world was, what saying yes would mean and what it would cost. She thought about what it meant to be Sable Voss, a woman who had spent 20 years building an empire alone, who had trusted one person, who had died on her own floor. Then she called his number and said yes. The months that followed changed everything. She did her work. She was precise and thorough, and she did not overreach. She had learned in her first life that the fastest way to build trust with a man like Dorian Vael was to do exactly what you said you would do, and nothing more and nothing less. People who tried to impress him with more made him cautious. People who delivered precisely made him rely. He began to rely on her. And as he relied, he opened doors. She saw the full scope of what he controlled. Not all at once, one room at a time, the legitimate operations and the ones below the surface, the network of relationships, debts, and leverages that held the city's entire underworld in a structure that was, she noted with professional admiration, extraordinarily well designed. She contributed, carefully at first, then more directly. She had 20 years of knowledge about how to structure intelligence operations, how to map influence networks, how to see threats 3 moves before they arrived. No 22-year-old on Earth could have had that knowledge. He noticed. He always noticed. And something shifted between them, slowly, the way that the slowest changes are always the most permanent. She was not naive about what was happening. She was also not afraid of it. He proposed 9 months in. No ceremony, no performance. They were at his desk, late. She was reviewing a document.
"I think you should marry me," he said. She set the document down. "Why?" "Because I haven't trusted anyone this completely since I was 17 years old." He looked at her. "And I don't expect to again." She held his gaze. "There are things about me I haven't told you," she said. "Things that would sound insane. Tell me." So she did. All of it. Sable Voss, the intelligence firm, the 20 years, the partner, the poison tea, the ceiling, waking up in a stranger's body with a stranger's face, and 20 years of someone else's life behind her eyes. He listened without speaking, without changing his expression, except once, very briefly, when she described the moment she died, and then it returned to that composed stillness. When she finished, the room was quiet. "I knew," he said. "Knew what?" "That the explanation didn't fit. A 22-year-old doesn't read the world the way you do, doesn't think the way you do. I knew there was something else." He paused. "I didn't know what." She waited. "It doesn't change my answer," he said. "The question is whether it changes yours." She looked at this man, this feared, ruthless, entirely singular man, who had just heard something that should have ended the conversation, and had instead sat with it, measured it, and arrived at, "It doesn't change my answer." "It doesn't change mine," she said. They were married 3 months later. Quietly. Ellis as witness. A judge who owed Dorian a favor. No announcement, no celebration. And then the city found out. The knowledge moved through Karoven's social circuit the way fire moves through dry grass. Lena Cho, Dorian Vael, married. The phones rang, the group chats exploded. In restaurants and boardrooms and the specific social tier of Karoven that lived and died by who was connected to whom, the information arrived like a bomb in a quiet room. Priya called within the hour. "Congratulations," she said. Her voice was doing that thing, the careful scaffolding of warmth over something that was absolutely not warmth. "We're all so happy for you. He's such an important man." Said Sable. "Mother is so proud." "Of course she is." A pause. Then Priya's voice dropped the scaffolding, just slightly, just enough to let the real thing show through. "I always knew you'd do well, Lena." Sable looked at the city through her window. The same city that had dismissed Lena Cho completely 6 months ago. The same social circuit that had not invited Lena Cho to anything, considered her nothing, filed her away in the drawer labeled irrelevant. "I know you did," she said, and hung up. Brenner's response came 3 days later through an emissary. He had always considered Lena Cho one of Karoven's most impressive young financial minds, and had the greatest respect for the Vael family. Dorian received this message and said nothing. Then he made 2 phone calls. Within a week, 2 of Brenner's major contracts had dissolved. A regulatory investigation opened on his primary holding company, the kind that takes years to resolve and costs everything in the process.
"You didn't have to do that," Sable said. "I know," he said. She understood. It wasn't done because she needed protecting. It was done because someone had tried to diminish her, and Dorian Vael did not permit the diminishment of what was his. She found, to her mild surprise, that she didn't mind it at all. The Karoven Economic Forum was the city's annual performance of its own power structure, the event where every important person stood in the same room and demonstrated through their position in it exactly where they ranked. She arrived with Dorian. The room registered them before they had crossed the entrance hall. Not loudly. This was a room of powerful people who didn't perform their reactions. But she felt it, the weight of attention finding its focal point, recalibrating. She wore deep red, the first strong color she'd worn publicly, every line of her face sharp and visible. They were seated at the head table. Priya was 3 tables back, her parents further still. Brenner was near the door. The forum moved through its first half without event.
Speeches, presentations, the formal dance of who shook whose hand and what that meant. Then Castor Len stood up. Len was a city councilor, 50s, silver-haired, the specific political confidence of a man who has been the smartest person in too many rooms. He had been, Sable knew from months of intelligence work, one of Brenner's protected allies, a man who had spent a decade accepting payments for regulatory favors and calling it governance. He began to speak about the city's financial infrastructure. He was smooth. He was intelligent. Packaged inside his language about public policy was a case for regulatory changes that would benefit his patrons and hollow out everything the Vael Group's legitimate operations depended on. Most of the room probably didn't catch it. Then he looked directly at the head table. "We must be careful," he said, his voice carrying beautifully across the room, "not to allow Karoven's financial sector to be shaped by parties whose primary interests lie outside legal frameworks." He paused. The pause was calculated. She saw the calculation in it.
There are those who have used marriage and social positioning to acquire influence they have not, in fact, earned. The people of Karoven deserve to know who is actually making decisions that affect their lives. The room went still. Every head at every table turned fractionally. Not all the way. This was not a room of people who showed their reactions, but enough. The head table, the question hanging in the air above it. He had not named her. He had not needed to. She felt Dorian shift beside her. She put her hand on his arm. Briefly, just briefly, and stood up. The room watched. She looked at Len from across the room with the perfect calm of someone who has spent 20 years sitting across from dangerous people and has never once flinched. "Counselor Len," she said, "I think you mean me." He smiled, the comfortable smile of a man who believes he has set a trap and is now watching his quarry walk into it. "I speak generally, of course." "Of course," she said. "Let me speak generally, too." She paused. Just one beat. "The regulatory changes you're proposing," she said, her voice clear and level and carrying to every corner of the room, "would reduce oversight of commodity pricing in the Port District by approximately 40% over 3 years. I've modeled the effects. They are not beneficial to small operators, as you've claimed. They are beneficial to 4 specific large operators, all connected to a single holding structure registered in a jurisdiction that Karoven's regulatory authority cannot easily examine." She held his gaze. "I can give you the registration number if it would help." Silence. She wasn't finished. "The proposal also contains a clause on page 47, subsection C, the kind of subsection designed to be found after everyone has stopped reading carefully, that transfers adjudication of port licensing disputes from the Independent Regulatory Board to the City Council's Business Committee." She let the room absorb that. "A committee on which you serve as chair." The silence had weight now. Real weight. The weight of 40 powerful people simultaneously revising their understanding of what they were watching. "I agree with you completely," she said, almost gently. "The people of Karoven do deserve to know who is making decisions about their city." She sat down. The room did not applaud. This was not an applause room, but she felt it, the seismic shift, the reorientation of the room's social gravity, the careful recalculations happening behind 40 pairs of controlled eyes. Len sat down. His face was composed. His breathing was not. Brenner, near the door, had gone the particular white of a man who has just watched his last protection fall. Dorian did not move beside her, did not speak, did not react in any visible way. But under the table, out of sight, his hand found hers. She allowed it. Afterward, in the hallway, 3 people she had never met introduced themselves in quick succession. A financial journalist, 2 business leaders who had been fighting Len's proposals for years, a senior official who had, until about 20 minutes ago, been publicly neutral. When the last of them moved on, Dorian appeared at her shoulder. He looked at her. "Page 47, he said. "I read everything twice," she said. He was quiet for a moment, the particular quality of his silence that she had learned to read as the closest he came to visible emotion. "The first time I saw you in that cafe," he said, very quietly, "I knew you were going to change everything." She looked at him. "Did you know then what that would cost you?" He met her eyes. "Yes." "And?" "Worth it," he said, without hesitation. The exposure broke open slowly, the way structural collapses always happen, invisible for months and then suddenly all at once. Len under formal investigation, his proposals dead. Brenner's legal situation deteriorating with the mechanical certainty of a well-constructed case. 2 additional officials implicated.
the regulatory structure of Karoven's port district being rebuilt from the inside out, quietly, thoroughly, in directions that would make the next version of this attack much harder to execute. Her family reorganized around her. Her father came to her on a Sunday afternoon with a business question, holding his cap in both hands. She spent 2 hours with him, watched his face change, the bewilderment receding, something warmer moving in. Her mother arrived one afternoon without announcement, sat in Sable's kitchen, looked at her for a long time. "I don't understand what happened to you," her mother said, "but I'm glad it did." Sable made tea. "I became more of what I was," she said. Her mother looked at her the way mothers look at children they are slightly afraid of understanding. "You look older than you should," she said, "like someone who has been through something very hard." Sable paused. "I have," she said, "but I came out the other side." Her mother reached across the table and put her hand over Sable's. Small gesture, nothing cinematic about it, just a hand on a hand. But something cracked open in Sable's chest, something she had not expected, had not built a defense against, because how do you defend against the thing you didn't know you were missing? She had died at 41. Her parents had died before she became what she became. They had never known her. Not really. Not the full version.
This woman across the table, imperfect, status-conscious, late, was looking at her with real eyes. She had a mother who could see her. She looked down at their hands. "I'm glad to be here," she said, and meant it so fully that her voice, for the first time in this new life, came out slightly unsteady. Her mother didn't say anything. She just held her hand tighter. Brenner made his last move in the spring. He had been methodical about it. Give the man credit for that. Stripped of his allies, his regulatory protection, most of his leverage, he had spent months constructing one final weapon. A claim that the document Sable had used in the Aldrin analysis had been obtained illegally. It was clever. If he could make it stick, demonstrate that her access was unauthorized, he might reframe the entire investigation as tainted. Not enough to save him, but enough to delay, enough to cost her something, enough to damage the reputation she had built in the one place where Dorian couldn't simply make a call. The hearing was held in a private legal chamber. 12 people, lawyers, a mediator, 2 regulatory representatives. Brenner attended personally. This was unusual. He rarely showed up for anything he couldn't control from a distance. But this was his last shot, and he wanted to watch it land. He sat across from Sable. He looked at her the way he had looked at her the first time, with the comfortable assumption of a man who had not yet updated his model of who he was dealing with. His lawyer opened. "The documentation used by Mrs. Vael to identify our client's alleged involvement in the Aldrin accounts was obtained through unauthorized access to private financial records. We have evidence that the source material was retrieved from systems to which she had no authorized access." "It was not," Sable said. "We have the access logs. The source material I used was Aldrin Shipping's own internal ledgers," she said, "provided to me directly by Vera Aldrin, the company's majority shareholder." She nodded toward the far side of the room. Brenner turned. Vera Aldrin was sitting at the end of the table, composed and very still, with the expression of a woman who has been watching someone attempt to rob her for 3 years and has decided today is the last day she will be polite about it. Brenner's jaw tightened. Sable continued. "Mrs. Aldrin is prepared to provide signed documentation of her authorization to any party in this room that requires it." She opened her folder. "Additionally, the access log your team has filed as evidence contains a timestamp error of 11 days. The server log references an archive system with a known clock drift issue, corrected in the March 2022 update. The IT documentation for that correction is on page 31 of my materials." She looked at Brenner. "Whoever built this claim knew financial documents, but not regulatory history. It would have worked against almost anyone who hadn't spent the better part of 2 decades studying exactly this kind of construction." She paused. "I understand the logic. It was the best play available from a very weak position." She tilted her head slightly. "It didn't work." Brenner's lawyer leaned in, whispered. Brenner didn't move. He looked at Sable across the table with the eyes of a man making a final calculation and arriving at a final answer. Not anger, not contempt anymore.
something past all of that. Recognition that he had miscalculated. Not once, systematically. From the very first morning in the cafe when he had walked over to test her, she had not been what he thought she was. She had never been what he thought she was. The claim, the mediator said, is dismissed. Outside, the spring afternoon was warm and bright and smelled of the harbor. Dorian stood beside her on the steps. They looked at the city together without speaking. The harbor light moved on the water. The 1,000 invisible currents of Karoven, money, power, information, loyalty, ran under the surface in patterns that had quietly shifted over the past year and a half. "It's done," she said. "For now," he said. "For now," she agreed. She thought about the man who had poisoned her tea in another city in another life. She had a name, she had a network, she had resources she was still building toward. She would find him. Not in anger. The anger had long been metabolized into something colder and more useful. She would find him the way she did everything, with patience, with precision, with the absolute certainty of someone who has already lived through the worst possible outcome and is still standing on the other side of it. But that was the next act. This one was complete. Dorian turned to look at her. The severe lines of his face in the afternoon light, the old scar on his jaw, the eyes that had seen everything and decided she was worth the trust he gave almost nothing. "I should tell you something," she said. He waited.
In my first life, she said, I built everything alone. I spent 20 years believing trust was a liability I couldn't afford, that the safest version of my life was the one that didn't depend on anyone else. She looked at the water. I was wrong. I found that out at the end. Being alone didn't protect me. It just meant there was no one there when it happened. Dorian was very still. I have things to lose now, she said. You, my mother's hand on mine, my father at my door on Sunday mornings, all of it. She turned to him. I'm not saying it's comfortable. I'm saying it's right. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, You came back to life. First thing you did was survive. Yes. Second thing? She thought about the cafe, the folder, the dinner, the night she had told him the impossible truth, and he had said, It doesn't change my answer. The second thing, she said, was trust you. He took her hand, not dramatically, just the weight of it, solid, warm, unhesitating. They stood there. The city moved around them, unaware of what had been done to it. The regulatory structure quietly reshaping, the old corrupt networks crumbling, new architecture rising in the places where the old architecture had rotted through. She had been Sable Voss. She had died at 41, staring at a white ceiling, betrayed by the only person she had trusted. She had come back as Lena Cho, a nobody, a throwaway, a girl her own family had stopped looking at. She had built everything again, from nothing, from a cracked paperback shelf and an empty bank account, and a body that didn't belong to her. And this time she had not built alone. Her enemies had been dismantled with her own hands. Her family had been recovered, imperfectly and completely, the way all real recoveries happen. The man beside her, the most feared man in Karoven, the man no one dared cross, the man who spoke in single words and moved cities, had chosen her, had heard the impossible truth of her, and stayed. The wind came off the harbor. She let it hit her face. Sable Voss had died on a Tuesday afternoon, and the universe, for reasons she would never understand, had decided that was not the end of her story. She was grateful. Not in a quiet, private way, in the full, complicated, slightly terrifying way of someone who knows exactly what it cost to get here, and exactly what it means to still be standing. She looked at the city. Her city. The next act was waiting. She was ready. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories.